Welcome back to the NoFX podcast. And once again, I am joined by my illustrious co-host. It's been a while. Say hello to Kirk. Hey, Kirk, say hello to them.
How's it going, everybody?
It's been a while, man. I'm glad that you're able to get back here. I went to Vegas recently, and when I was in Vegas, there were a few little presentations where the kind folks at Wizards of the Coast decided to spoil some stuff. And at this point, the whole thing has been spoiled, but it's called Foundations, and this is kind of the new core set that is legal for a very long time. It's supposed to be standard legal for 5 years, so this one set is essentially the core set for the next fucking forever. Yeah, and it's supposed to be sort of print to demand and printed and regularly available for all of those 5 years. So this is supposed to be a product that any of us can get our hands on without any fear of places selling out and whatever, and yada yada.
You mean we don't have to be in the queue at the right time?
Right, yeah. It's not a secret lair. You're probably going to be able to get your hands on this, and it actually has a lot to offer to a multitude of formats, including Pauper, Commander, EDH, and CDH, which we cover here mostly, and that's what we're going to talk about today, although there will be some little bits about Pauper, because that's what I like to do. I like to cross over between the things. But yeah, I mean, that's really it for an intro. We're going to talk about some Foundations cards here. We've got a few honorable mentions, and we've got a few cards that we think are going to see some CEDH play. And we talked about a lot of other cards too that we managed to cut out of the list, but there's probably a lot of cards that you're going to find play for your individual niche decks and yada yada. But we're going to focus on the competitive side of things and go from there. So.
Well, we're doing the Foundations and the Foundations Jumpstart, so we're doing both.
Yes, I guess we should notate that this is one of those weird sets where, well, not weird, but like kind of the standard thing where we've had multitude of things kind of falling under the same umbrella. It is Foundations as a set, and then there is the Foundations Jumpstart. There's also an Artist Spotlight, which is these weird anime-style cards that are, I don't know if they're special treatments or just the only printing that you can get of them. That isn't really clear to me because I haven't bought any. The pre-release is happening, like, as we speak, essentially, this weekend. By the time this releases, you'll maybe have your hands on some of these cards, but generally speaking, they are kind of, like I said, the replacement for the core set, so to speak, which we've already had replacements of that in other forms and shapes and whatnot. But here we are. It's an ever-changing game, and it's an never-ending spoiler season. And yeah, let's dive into it. So coming up first, we're going to talk about some honorable mentions, things that we don't think are actually going to see a ton of play anywhere, but that were fun things to talk about. So the first one I have here is actually making some big waves in not the competitive CEDH sphere, but the competitive Pauper sphere. I personally have already built 3 decks that are centered around this card, and they appear to be, at least in gold fishing, pretty strong. There's a lot of hype for this, and there's a lot of conversation going around this card. It may also see some play in casual EDH spheres. It's definitely not a competitive EDH card, but it's heir apparent. So this is another one of those rule break cards. So the last one we got was Slimes Against Humanity. Prior to that was Dragon's Approach. Prior to that was like Petitioners, and we had Rats, and we had the Shadowborn Apostles. It's cards that say a deck can have any number of cards named X. And in our singleton format, that's not normally something that is allowed. So these are the cards that break the rules, so to speak. Anyhow, this is heir apparent. It's a 1 and a white, 2/2 Rabbit Noble, which ironically came out just after Bloomburrow, where we all cared about these little fuzzy fuckers. This says, whenever it enters, create a number of 1/1 white rabbit creature tokens equal to the number of other creatures you control named heir apparent, and then obviously you can have any number of these. So the decks that I've built have 30 copies of this. So first one comes down, does nothing. It's just a 2/2 for 2. It's a bear. Plain and simple. Second one comes down, it's now you have 2 2/2s, but you also create a 1/1. Next one comes down, you have 3 2/2s and 3 1/1s, and it just exponentially grows. And it makes a lot of sense because, what reproduces more than rabbits?
Cockroaches.
I mean, insects, and that's about it. As far as mammals go, hares are the thing. And that's literally the tagline of my first deck that I built with this, was that they came to rapidly reproduce. So, this is probably going to affect Pauper more than anything. I could see casual decks. Bloomburrow did have some rabbit support. There is a Burrow Guard Mentor or something where it's like X, its power toughness equals to the number of creatures you control. It has trample. I actually built the deck with that as the commander because in Pauper you can use an uncommon creature. Yada yada. But yeah, not super exciting for competitive, but it is something that is going to make a splash in other formats, and it's interesting. I like these card or rule breaking cards. I tried to bust Dragon's Approach. I kind of did in casual, but in other formats not so much. I built some slime decks. I've tried rats in the past a few times. To be fair, probably like 4 or 5 times to try and make... The last one that was good was the one that made all your rats have toxic. I think it was the all will be one. I tried to make it work in CDH. It's just aggro can't work in CDH, unfortunately, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at on it. I don't. Who knows? Surprise me, I guess, somebody, but I don't think this will see any play in CDH. But it is definitely an interesting card. I'm gonna go with. I want to talk about Twin Flame Tyrant next because I think it's another one that'll see very little niche play. It's 2 red and 3 colorless for a dragon, and it's a 3/5 with flying. If a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage instead. I saw this card in one of the weird fringe decks I occasionally play against is Heartless Hidetsugo, or however the hell you say it.
Yeah.
I immediately thought of this card for that. There's probably
that's the one where it's like tap and it does like deals half your life to everybody.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So
He's
if you
like
can double that,
and,
you just kill them.
He deals damage to each player equal to half that player's life total rounded down. So if they have an even life total, it does silly stuff with this card.
I could see this in any other deck that's looking to double damage too. We talked about it before recording. Rev has a Mogus deck that is just attrition in every sense of the word. Every card that's played in there is making you lose life or just taking game actions, and this just doubles that up. Same thing with like the one from what was it, like Kaldheim or something, where it like tripled the damage. There's been Dictate of the Twin God. Like there's a ton of damage doubling things out there. This is just more redundancy if you're into that. I also could see a fringe case for like, say, a deck that is running Dragon's Approach. This is something you could tutor out. Next up, this one's a little weird. I only brought it up because we have had a number of cards like this printed in the last few years, where like if something happens, like just incidental game actions happen more than once, this thing triggers and you get something. In this case, it's Mischievous Mystic, 2/1 human wizard with flying for 1 and a blue. It says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. That's not great. It's kind of like Murdering Mystic, where you cast a spell, you get a bird. Notably, it is a wizard, so you could wizard cycle for it, or step through, those types of things, if this is what you were going for. I just thought it was nice to highlight just because it is, like, you're in blue. It's a blue card. You're going to have your Ristics, your Mystics, your other things. You may incidentally just be drawing extra cards, and you're just going to make tokens, and they're not big, but, like, flyers get through more often than not, so it could be incidental damage to the table, but it's not great. And I don't know exactly what deck wants this, outside of decks that are definitely drawing lots of cards.
Yeah, I mean, 2 mana, 2/1 flyer. The evasive body's nice. I could see, like, if a deck that's
the issue is
doing
Bowmasters, right?
Combat also. What's that?
The issue is Bowmasters.
Yeah, it dies to Bowmaster. If you're drawing active cards, Bowmaster's good against you. Yeah, if it was a 2/2, it'd be a little bit more interesting, I think. But even then, yeah, it's you're gonna have to have something where the creature bodies that it could produce something relevant, like with like a Tymna or something where you're drawing cards. And if you're in like Tymna decks, you're probably doing something more powerful than this. But
you're also probably not in blue, unless you're still playing Blue Farm, which. Yeah, people are playing Blue Farm, but this is not going to replace something. This is why it's on the honorable mentions. It was just interesting to me because it is a second whenever you get this incidental, I drew a second card, I get a token. Maybe you sacrifice that token for something. Maybe you do something with that token. Maybe it's just incidental damage swinging in. It's not great, but it was worth highlighting, I thought. Speaking of highlighting, another one that I thought was interesting, though through discussion prior to the recording, maybe not good enough, but something to perhaps consider. It's Blasphemous Edict. It's at its base, it's a 3 and 2 black, so 5 CMC sorcery. Not good on that level. But it says you may pay just black rather than pay the spell's mana cost if there are 13 or more creatures on the battlefield. That's gonna happen sometimes, and then there are those times where like you're playing against a number of more controlling decks that just don't play creatures, and this is just a dead card. But it says each player sacrifices 13 creatures of their choice. Where this shines is if you are in a pod where a lot of creatures are coming down. You hit 13, you pay 1 black, everybody sacrifices everything. You do have to sacrifice your own creatures too, but maybe you don't have creatures and they have the 13 power on the board. This is a symmetric or a board wipe for 1 black, which black doesn't have without requiring a loss of life or something else. So in that regard, it seems pretty okay. It seems kind of busted, but could probably make a lot of arguments as to why it's not.
My biggest fear with this one is if there are 13 creatures in the battlefield, if it gains some kind of interesting clause, like where if there are 13 creatures on the battlefield, you could cast it for 1 black mana as an instant. Something like that would be a hell of a lot more interesting, because then you could get the Kiki decks or something like that. But being sorcery speed, and if there are 13 creatures on the battlefield, you're probably already dead to some weird combo creature interaction, but who knows?
And at that rate, this is why we put on the honorable mentions, because this maybe is just better in a casual setting. I was just comparing it to other board wipes that are popular in the format, like Toxic Deluge, which costs, 3? And then you also have to pay the life. You're probably not paying 13 life, but you're going to pay some number between 2 and 5 or so on top of a mana investment. If you're in white, you have Damn. That just clears the board, but also hits your creatures. I think this hits your creatures too. It's definitely better when you're coming from behind. So I guess we could just move on from there.
Fair enough. The next one I put on the list, I think Sandstorm Crasher is kind of an interesting one. 1 red and 3 for a 3/4 Minotaur Berserker Wizard of all things. It has trample, which is kind of nice. And you may exert Sandstorm Crasher as it attacks. When you do, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of target creature you control. Sacrifice the token at the beginning of the next end step. First creature that came to mind when I was thinking of this, I believe you could go infinite with the Red-White Angel. What is it, Aurelia? I put it in my note. Aurelia, the War Leader, which, when she attacks, you have a trigger to untap all creatures you control. Then there's another combat phase after this, so you stack the triggers. When they both attack, you make a trigger of Aurelia. Then you put this trigger on the stack, sacrifice to the original Aurelia. They all untap, bada boom, bada bing. There's probably other creatures that combo with this. Just that was the first one that came to my head right off the top.
I don't like that it has Exert, because Exert makes things more complicated. Does Combat Celebrant have Exert?
Yes.
So that still works, so that doesn't matter.
I mean, and there are other instances, if you just have this in play and you've played some kind of a creature that's like a Spell Seeker or something, where you just get another tutor if you're in some weird deck that plays that, where you want a second copy of Eternal Witness or Spell Seeker or Dockside. Haha, just kidding. It could also just do that. It could get value there.
This with Dockside, probably great. This without Dockside, nice. Probably not as good, but yeah, I can see some uses. And just incidentally making copies of things that might tutor you something is fine.
I could see somebody trying in something weird. And I'm sure there's other creatures that I can't think of that combo with it immediately, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
The next one I put on the list is Nib Mizzet Visionary. 1 blue, 1 red, and 4 colorless. So the easiest to cast Nib Mizzet, I believe, that's been printed so far by a wide margin. It's a 5/5 flying dragon wizard, a legendary dragon wizard. You have no maximum hand size, and whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards. So any of your little incidental, I can't think of the names right off the top of my head, but whenever you cast a non-creature spell, anything that those cast a non-creature spell, deal a damage to each opponent kind of
Firebrand
stuff.
Archer,
huge
Erebor Flamesmith.
There's an otter in the Blue Girl set.
Alchemist, Blister Spit Goblin. There's a ton of them.
Yeah, also any of those like ETB deal damage each opponent stuff. Anything that's dealing non-combat damage is going to draw you,
etc. Impact Tremors even.
With this. Yeah. Fart ton of cards. So being a huge 5/5 flyer for 6, not that great because it'll just die to removal. No. Blah blah blah.
This feels like pinger.deck, really. So it's like absolutely. Just every single pinger you can put in there, you do. And there's even some blue ones like what's it, Tim and other ones like that.
I mean, so this does notably combo with the other Niv Mizzet that saw a lot of play before Jeweled Lotus and Dockside got banned. The Niv Mizzet Perun or Perun or however they say it.
Perun, yeah.
These two are a combo together, but I don't foresee playing that in the 99 of a deck. It's definitely morphing into it or potting into it.
It's easier to cast than Perun, although Perun like puts all the pieces on your card to just win, and that's why it's the best one. But it's so hard to cast.
This one you can cast off a Mana Vault and
very much
lands,
easier to cast. So yeah, I can see the advantage for it, but I also just don't like it. And this one notably does not do shit with Curiosity, which
that's a good and bad thing though. Like, so if you're
but like every Niv Mizzet has always comboed with Curiosity. Like it was Curiosity control with fucking Niv Mizzet, and like it just doesn't have that now. That's so
this one doesn't auto win essentially with those. But if you're playing all the like play a non-creature spell, incidentally deal damage each opponent creature anyway.
It's better for Storm. In that
way sense. Better for Curiosity on those too. You just throw it on your little Firebrand Archer,
right?
Cast a Chromox and draw 3 cards. I mean, shit, that's not bad.
Right. Yeah,
it's not going to win you the game immediately, but it's going to spiral out of control with card advantage. And then I hate the no maximum hand size clause of this because I feel like somebody's going to screw me with a windfall somehow, and it's just gonna get me. But hey, this I think this one will see some play. I think people that are looking for their Niv Mizzet fix will try it. Who knows?
Right. It's too soon to say whether or not it's actually going to be good enough. On paper, I don't like it, but who am I?
Another one I put on here, the Sprawling Crawler. So this one, it's 3 colorless for a 3/2 Phyrexian Construct artifact creature, and it has the static abilities. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card, and whenever an opponent draws a card, that player loses 1 life. So the 2 decks that came to mind for me with this one immediately would be Obnixilis, and also something you see occasionally. It's very, very fringy, but Nekusar, I think it is, the Mind Razor guy. Whenever an opponent draws a card, it deals damage to them. I think
I've seen him here and there.
Yeah.
The thing I don't like about this is that it is a little bit group huggy because everybody draws cards off of it. But it is in the same vein as Nekusar, where that's the same thing. It says everybody draws 2 on their draw step, but then they lose life every time they draw a card. This is an absolute shoe-in for a Nekusar deck, because this is just stacking more of that shit on there. You can also then counter this with like a Narset or a Notion Thief or something, where you're just stopping people from getting the extra card draw, because they can't. Right, so if you can set this up properly, this can actually be in your favor. But a lot of the time, this is just going to be drawing people more cards, and I don't like it for that reason.
While I don't love that, at least this one has to survive to your upkeep to draw everybody to cards. So it's not like some of those, the Howling Mind effect.
People are less likely to remove it because they want to draw the extra card, right?
Right, yeah. And at least you're getting the card at the same time they are. Some of those cards are so bad because it's like I play Nekusar and the next opponent in turn order draws more cards, then so on, more cards and more cards, then it dies before it gets back to you.
Right. This one, everybody gets the advantage and then you remove it. Yeah, that's
I mean, you're getting 1 card, they're getting 1 card each, so you're getting 1 to 3 for your opponents, which is not great. But it also does just punish heavy draw cards. So if somebody's playing that blue-red Niv Mizzet or something where they're drawing a far ton of cards,
yeah, it is kind of a stacks piece in that regard too, because it can punish decks that are just going ham drawing cards. So
loss of life too. So suck it, One Ring.
Yeah, like it combats a 1 ring. Like they're drawing however many and then taking that much life, and then on their upkeep they're taking even more. So it's doubling down on life loss on 1 rings. It's doubling down on, well, not doubling, but it's just dealing damage on Ristics and Mystics and all that
shit. Again, not super powerful, and I don't foresee this seeing a ton of play unless I'm crazy and wrong, and who knows. But I do think this one might see a smidge of play, and people will try it in some.
There are
decks,
cards out there
that
too that synergize with, like, if somebody loses life, X thing happens, like Sanguine Bond and whatever. So if you're already in a deck like Dina or a Witherbloom Apprentice or something, where you're like already trying to maximize people losing life so that you gain life, or vice versa, like, this could be a piece that helps. But at the end of the day, 3 mana to fucking give people cards, I don't like it.
Fair enough.
Next one, which we have laughed heavily at this artwork and also all of the implications of what this may be implying because we're old and dirty ass men. But it's Plagon, Lord of the Beach. It's 2 and a blue for an 0/3 legendary creature, Starfish Wizard. So you can tutor him up if you really need him. It says whenever he enters, draw a card for each creature you control with toughness greater than its power. And then it says hybrid white-blue, so a white or a blue. Target creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power this turn. This is a shoe-in for Arcades and literally nothing else. Literally nothing else. Like, nobody, I can't see another deck where anybody gives a shit about this. But it's the chocolate starfish and the hot dog flavored water. Limp Bizkit has made its way here. And if you are younger than like 30, you probably don't even know who Limp Bizkit is. And that's fine. And you probably don't need to know, but, you know, keep rolling. It fits right into that deck. As soon as Kirk told me about this card, I glossed over this completely. He told me about it, and I was like, okay, this is fucking stupid. But yeah, literally, it does fit into Arcades. And Arcades has been, I wouldn't say competitive, but like it's on the cusp. It can be pretty high powered, depending on how you build it. It can be a very good control shell that just plays out these big-ass cheap creatures with big butts, no power, defenders, etc., and being able to just pay a mana to make deals damage equal to its toughness rather than its power.
It does
not bad. If you are playing Arcades, you're probably already going to have a bunch of creatures out that have bigger toughness and power, so this hits and it draws you a fuck ton of cards. And that's something that Arcades has struggled with. When I built Arcades, back in my day, we had Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora, but we didn't have Esper Sentinel, we didn't have Archivist of Agama, we didn't have Ledger Shredder, we didn't have Fairy Mastermind. There's been a fuck ton of cards that have been printed that draw you more cards. This would have been amazing back then as a catch-all to, like, just, you know, give us a bunch of cards. But at the end of the day, it still is something that's good for that deck. Which means it's probably casual at best. But we couldn't resist
it draws a card from itself. I mean,
that too.
And this might be a play mat I need to find and buy, damn it. I mean,
honestly, I hate this anime artwork in this shit, but this is fucking hilarious. Yes. And people will see it on screen, so.
Exactly. This card's great.
Fucking wild. And again, we're still on honorable mentions, but.
Dude, when you play this, you get to read its flavor text. It says, "No more lurking in the shallows. We ride." I mean, how do you not love this card? Lord of the Beaches.
Beaches and butt stuff. All right, last honorable mention, and this one is another flavor win.
I don't even know how to pronounce the name, but it's Taiko? Oh. Taiko, the Patient Avalanche. It's 1 blue and 3 for a 4/5 legendary creature, Turtle Ninja. That's right.
Ninja Turtle? What?
Got another Ninja Turtle.
And the fucking art. What kills me is the artwork looks like. It doesn't look like a ninja. It looks like a samurai. Like, it's this huge hulking body with like armor on it.
Things, and it's like, karate chopping, bro.
This doesn't look like a fucking Ninja Turtle. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, it's a 4 mana 4/5. It enters the battlefield tapped. Whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it didn't die, you scry 1 and put a 1/1 counter on it. So when you ninja things back to your hand, and whenever it attacks, you can pay hybrid, Dimir, blue-black, either or. So it's just 1. Whenever you do, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn.
So well, that's notable. So, like, as I was reading this in the pre-show, I was like, okay, so this wants me to flicker stuff so that you get the scry and put a 1/1 counter on it. But then you see the blue-black hybrid thing, so its color identity is Dimir. And then I was like, what? And then Kirk was like, ninjutsu, dumbass. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's a ninjutsu. But even then, it's just not good. It's just not good. But it's really a fucking Ninja Turtle, so we had to talk about it.
We gotta have it in the honorable mention. I mean,
we have to.
I think that
we are of the age where we were alive when Ninja Turtles first started. Big fan. I read the comics. I watched this cartoon. I played the video games. I had the toys. Shit, I just bought a fucking Ninja Turtle game the other day. Like literally, just came out.
I just bought my nephew a Lego set of a Ninja Turtle van for his birthday recently, man. I mean,
there you go.
Still popular today.
I'm still mad about Legos though, because Legos are fucking way cooler now than they were when I was a kid.
Dude, you're not wrong. You are not wrong.
All right, well that gets us past the honorable mentions. Let's start talking about some real fucking CDH cards. How about we do that? All right, so I'll start with this first one. It is a Electro Duplicate. All right, so this is a sorcery for 2 and a red. And it says, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except that it has haste and at the beginning end step, sacrifice it. Also has flashback for 2 and 2 red. This is literally Twin Flame for 1 more mana, but has flashback. So if you cast this to try and do a Twin Flame loop, and somebody counters it, it goes to your grave. If you happen to have enough mana, you can recast it. If not, you can try again next turn. And for that reason, this is very much redundancy with Twin Flame, Molten Duplication, and what's the other one?
That's what I'm trying to think of.
Oh my god, what's the other one? The old one that I stopped playing.
Yeah, that one you can target your opponent's creatures, but I'll be damned if I can remember what it's called right now. That's what I was trying to look up. Heat Shimmer.
3 cards, same effect. A lot of us cut Heat Shimmer because it was the additional mana. Even though it has its own applications, I personally only used to run Twin Flame solely. And then when Molten Duplication came out, because it was the same CMC and gave you some flexibility, I started playing that. I feel like this is worth a slot in any of those decks that are trying to do dual caster Twin Flame loops, because it has flashback. So even if it gets milled, great. If you gamble for it and it goes in the graveyard, sure, it costs you 2 more. Fuck it. You can still win the game. So this is just more redundancy for those types of decks, and I'm here for it.
Yep, the deck that immediately came to mind for me is Joey from the gameplay videos that we do. He has that Ashling deck that's doing all the looting and all that bullshit.
You can copy this a bunch of times, and then if it gets fucked up, it's still a flashback.
Specifically for this deck, you could discard this, draw your new card. When you get to your dual caster mage, this costs 4 mana to flashback from the grave. So I'm going to ask Joey if he's going to try this in Ashling or not. So
I'm looking at putting it into a couple of my decks that are already running the other 2, just because it is more redundancy and has that flashback ability. This is immediately a strictly better Heat Shimmer.
Heat Shimmer?
Yeah.
The only advantage to Heat Shimmer, you could target your opponent's creatures too, I think.
I get that, but that doesn't help you win. And in this case, this is going to help you win. This is a strictly better Heat Shimmer. If you're running Twin Flame, Molten Duplication, and Heat Shimmer, cut Heat Shimmer for this. You're going to have a better time. That's my opinion. I'm going to stick by it.
What do we got next? High Fae Trickster. I think that's the next on our list. It is 1 blue and 3 for a 4/2 fairy wizard with flash, flying, and you may cast spells as though they had flash. So this is just like Wizards is in love with this effect lately. Like we went from
nothing.
There's a 3 mana 1/4 that you could do it on your opponent's end steps to Valley Floodcaller, where you could cast non-creature spells at instant
really
speed.
came out recently, and this is basically a second copy of that. And
this
then,
one lets you cast creatures at instant speed also.
Lord of the Rings did the
Born Upon the Wind.
Born Upon the Wind.
Yep.
Prior to that, most decks that were doing things with, Shimmer Zur was only a thing because of Shimmer Mirror, and that allowed you to cast your artifacts for free while doing Necropotence things, but didn't allow you to cast anything else for free, so it was kind of limited. And then they printed Born Upon the Wind and the one Mono White Gandalf, which also fits into a Zur deck if you really wanted to go that route.
Also
anything else.
Urza's Liberator, Battlethopter,
that is
some
also,
mixture of those words. I don't remember the order. And then
Urza Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter.
Sounds right.
The way it goes. So there's
some
that.
Skittering Insect that does it too now. So there's just a ton.
Yeah, there's like 6 copies of this now. So if you were very much trying to Necropotence and then manipulate all that shit at instant speed, you have a literal fuck ton of ways to do that. But you don't even have to be on that strategy. This is just a creature you can flash in and then sit back. Like, every time I've played against a Liberate, well, I've only played against 2 people that play it. Rev's one of them, and the other person was on my server, and we just played casually. Every time I've ever played against a Liberator deck, they flashed it in on somebody's end step, then they just sat around, kept a bunch of mana open, and everybody's end step they flashed in artifacts and this and that and the other thing. But that's a colorless deck, and it's not really good. I would argue that it's not a good deck, period, but despite winning games, it is what it is. I would say that this is good for any deck where you just want to be able to have that gotcha factor, or just you're drawing a ton of cards or whatever, and you always have cards in hand. Maybe you're playing that Niv Mizzet deck, and you're no max hand size. You got 16 cards in hand. You want to flash them in whenever the fuck you want to flash them in. Good for you.
I think people will try it. Just the being able to cast anything at flash speed, including creatures, is pretty damn nice. A 4/2 flyer is a huge relevant body. I mean, this thing can beat the crap out of people in the air. I mean, I think this one will see some play. I don't think it's better than Valley Floodcaller, just because that one being 3 mana and casting non-creatures is probably what you're doing to win the game most of the time. But who knows? I mean,
this is all spells, though. So, so again, there's like 6 or 7 copies of this effect. Choose what you want.
This one doesn't. I think the Valley Floodcaller got the untapped birds, otters, frogs, lizards. Your Aunt Christie, I don't know, something. It's got like a 500 untapped things on it. So, but
your Aunt Christie approves. But at the end of the day, this is just an additional effect that we've seen multiple
redundancy
times. Like me personally, I'm on Born Upon the Wind in most decks. That one just being a spell, it's just easy to cast. It's not a creature, you don't have to worry about it. I like this though for decks that are draw go, sort of control list where they can just flash this in and then flash something else in. Being able to add flash speed to sorceries can be a big deal, because a lot of sorceries are super powerful, but they're just shitty because they are sorcery speed, right? So being able to turn them into instants makes them a lot better.
A lot of the good sorceries, are black or blue.
Like Feed the Swarm. Feed the Swarm sucks because of sorcery, but when you can make it an instant, pretty fucking good.
Well, just being able to cast a Demonic Tutor at instant speed is pretty hot, or cast your Imperial Seal and make it into Vampiric Tutor is pretty good. I mean,
right? So there's a lot of uses for
instant speed, pretty powerful. So I think this one will see some play. I do. I think people will try it.
I think it just adds to redundancy of strategies that are already happening. So,
well, and as you and I both know, a lot of times in CEDH specifically, attempting to go for the win first, a lot of times you get stopped. You just do. Everybody's holding their counteraction or their removal, and a lot of times the person that tries to win second will win, because if that's immediately after the win attempt, maybe everybody shot their load, they can't stop the next win, or sometimes it's the third win, so on and so forth. Having this, being able to just hold up your entire suite of non-land cards to just go off when you want, super powerful. Plus, letting you sit with your draw-go strategy in CEDH seems pretty powerful.
Well, even just being able to set up over a couple turns. You flash this out on a turn 1 because you just had the nuts to where you could, you had Gemstone, and then you had a land, and you had a Soul Ring or whatever. You flash this out on the guy's turn before you. You're going into turn 2. This is already here now. You play whatever. You have some lands. You're like, I don't really have anything to do. I'll pass. And then somebody does something. You flash in a fucking... There's literal creatures that have counter spells on them.
Yep, and I think just being able to... Another way to win on top of somebody else's win, even on a creature-based combo or something, is powerful. So I think this will see some play.
Next one we have, I highlighted this one in a weird sort of sense because if you don't know, I have a stream team. We stream, and we've been doing it for fucking almost 2 years at this point. It's me, it's that guy, it's Rev, and it's Joey. And all of them have been on this podcast, so you should be familiar. Ironically, this card is named Rev Tithe Extractor, so I was like, bro, you have to fucking build this. Also, ironically, he shared with us some various cosplays he's done where he's dressed himself up as a female. And this is pretty representative of what he looks like.
You're not wrong.
So I was like, bro, you have to fucking build this deck. He built it. You'll see it on the channel at some point. But so this is a Rev Tithe Extractor. It's 3 and a black for a 3/3. Legendary creature, human rogue. Whenever you attack, target creature gains death touch on a turn. So that's okay. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Then look at the top card of that player's library and exile it face down. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. So this is literally like Black Ragavan, but you're not limited to casting it right then. You have it forever. As long as it's exiled, you have it. So this is giving you some sort of card advantage. It's also giving you mana advantage. They can deal no damage. They can just chill. Doesn't matter. Any creature you control deals combat damage to a player. It makes all your whole board are Ragavans, essentially. Pretty good.
Yeah, it gives something. It gives at least one creature you attack with Death Touch, which is an incentive not to be blocked. So
right. So you say, okay, yeah. I'm going to attack with this 1/1 whatever the fuck. Give it Death Touch, and people are like, well, I'm not going to block with my Crom because I don't want it to die. And then you exile a card off the top of their library. And get a treasure token, and you can cast that for the rest of the fucking game. As a commander, mono black is a little rough sometimes, but as a commander, this seems pretty good. Even in the 99, this seems pretty good. I think this is going to see play regardless of our little inside joke meme, but we also made Rev build it, and yeah.
He didn't have to twist his arm too hard.
No.
I will say, I mean, it's kind of, you see some professional face breakers see some play, right?
Yeah.
You see some Grim Hireling sees some play. Granted, it's 2 treasures is huge for
a lot
your warrior combo deck, Najila. But yeah, I mean, the treasure advantage is real. Ragavan sees play, obviously, because it's a 1-drop. But this kind of being a 4-drop, it's a little harder to play, but it does give you card advantage and mana advantage with treasures and the pseudo evasion of giving something death touch. Sure, it's not unblockable, trample, blah, blah, blah.
It can also sit in a deck that cares about rogues. Which there was that one Dimir, it was like one of those precons a couple of years back, probably like 5 years back at this point. But Anawan, I think it was the
Ruin
Blue.
Sage.
No, that was the OG one. It was it was one of those like when they were trying to make the precons like cheaper. Okay. There was like 4, maybe, that came out, and they were like, instead of being like $40, they were like $20. I want to say it was Anawan. Let me look it up. Let me see if I can confirm. Anawan the Ruin Thief. It was a part of a precon. It was Zendikar Rising. What was that like?
Forever ago.
2020. Yeah, but this was other rogues you control get +1/+1, and whenever one or more rogues you control do a combat damage to a player, that player mills a card for each 1 damage dealt to them. If they mill at least 1 creature, you draw a card. Not a good card. Point being is that this is also a rogue, so like in a deck like this, if you're playing casual bullshit, whatever, this fits right into that. But on its own, just on its face, seems like a pretty good commander anyway.
Yeah, so. I do like that the card you exile, you look at it, then you exile it face down, so your opponent has no idea what's been exiled. So there are some times where you probably will just totally screw them over because they won't have any clue what's out of their deck, and they go to 2
hard to do on spell table. But
that's
outside
true.
of
Scheming Symmetry does exist, and I hope Rev put it in his deck. So it's 1 black mana you tutor and target opponent tutors.
Yeah,
careful what you put on top because that might be
the thing that gets stolen. So the next one is a new version of an old creature, but yeah.
Yep, we saw a return to in Thunder Junction too, I think, right? This one's Tiny Bones Bauble Burglar. 1 black and 1 for a 1/3. I think this is the biggest of the Tiny Bones. I could be wrong. 1 black and 1 for a 1/3 legendary creature skeleton rogue.
1/2.
I think the other one's like a 1/1, and the other one, the first one was a 1/2, and the second one's a 1/1 maybe.
I don't recall.
We can look, but irrelevant. This one says, whenever an opponent discards a card, exile it from their graveyard with a stash counter on it. During your turn, you may play cards you don't own with stash counters on them from exile, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. It also has 3 and a black, tap it. Each opponent discards a card, activate only as a sorcery. So, the reason that I think this one's worth considering, and maybe this one should be kind of, it's hovering between the considering, honorable mention, and playable.
Yeah.
Wheel of Fortune, Windfall, ... Any kind of wheel effect where your opponents discard their hand and draw X cards, this one's going to be pretty damn good.
This in conjunction with Turgid, pretty fucking good. Yeah.
There you go. So yeah, I mean,
it also has the same thing like Evelyn and Paco Halden and some of the other cards that put cards in a special zone just for you that gives you card advantage.
Stash.
And we like that.
As I stroke the stash. I don't know. This one's not great, but I think it's interesting. The 4 mana tap it, each opponent discards a card. Maybe in a long game, you're doing something there.
You're not doing that very often, I don't think. But just getting the stash cards, pretty good. There are a lot of symmetrical, like Siphon Mind or whatever, where like everybody discards cards, you draw cards, and then you get the triggers off this. There are other forces, but like Duress and other things like that feel kind of shitty.
Very medium CDH. For sure.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this as if you're playing Wheels and you're doing something like Orcish Bowmaster and this, you got a decent number of low, cheap cost black creatures that are huge payoff with Wheels effects. This one may not be the strongest of those effects, however, it is something to consider.
Yeah, it survives Bowmasters for only 2 mana. 1/3 for 2 mana is pretty solid.
Pretty big. And
especially with everything
Amber
else.
Got better, Relic of Legends got better. This being a legend is relevant. So
turns on your Deadly Relic, I guess, too. Forced discard is rough in CDH.
It could really end up being
like everything you described is like I need a Bowmaster, I need Wheels, I need all these things, and in black you don't have Wheels, so this can't be your commander. That has to be in the 99 as some other deck. So you have to get this guy out. You have to get a Wheel. You have to get Narset. You have to get Notion Thief. You have to get blah 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 blah. That just feels like way too much setup compared to some of the other Tiny Bones that were like, it kind of just built itself.
I think like Dark Deal is the only wheel I can think of in black that each opponent discards are there. So, I mean, they do exist.
That's not great.
Thinking of this as a 99 card for something. Who knows? There are, I'm sure there's other discard commanders and things that I'm not thinking of.
Rev already had a Tiny Bones deck and he literally updated it to this and cool. But I don't know. I don't feel like it's strong enough. This is kind of on that cusp too of like honorable mention, actually good card, but it does have that little clause of like, if you can force some people to discard some cards, you're gonna have an extra hand, and that's pretty okay.
Well, it's just exiling it out of their graves is also nice. So, if they can't activate their lines, I diamond if this is on the battlefield effectively.
Having that extra little like stacks and claws is pretty good too. Next one up I have here, this one is also kind of a weird, could be a commander, but probably is better in other decks than the 99, but it's Dionysus, Elvish Archdruid. It's 3 and a green for a 3/3 Elf Druid. Elves you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped during your turn, untap it and put a 1/1 counter on it, but that only triggers once each turn. So, where I have a confusion, I guess, is that, like, okay, so, if this is your commander, you're obviously going to be playing Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, blah, 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 blah. You cast any of those creatures, they're on the field, this is on the field, you tap one of those for mana, and now this says, okay, untap it and put a 1/1 counter on it. So it's like Pseudo-Vigilance, and it also is buffing it. This ability only triggers once each turn. My understanding would be that, like, you tap 1 mana dork, it untaps it, puts a counter on it, it has Vigilance, so to speak.
No, I think this gives it to, because it says elves you control have, and then it's quote, and it's the whole quote. So I think this ability triggers only once.
Every elf gets that ability, but it can only happen once. Okay, that's the way I understood it to begin with. So we're going to roll with that. So in that case, this is a commander, just says all of your mana dorks, tap for mana, then untap and are bigger, and you can then swing with them to make them bigger.
Or tap them again.
Or tap them again, but not get the claws. So it is kind of a pseudo-vigilance. It's pseudo-vigilance for your dorks, because most other elves aren't going to have a tap ability. They're just going to be a normal elf. So you can't tap them to get this claws. This is an absolute shoe-in for like a Raga Draga deck. So Raga Draga is a Groll commander that's a 4/4. Each creature you control with a mana ability gets +2/+2. So that's already like your dorks are 3/3s. But then with the other creature out on the field, you would tap them, make them a 4/4, and then they untap, and you can attack with them still. And it says whenever a creature you control with a mana ability attacks, untap it. So it's doing the same thing. You could tap for mana, untap with die whatever the fuck, and then re-attack, and then untap again. So you have like double pseudo-vigilance, but also you're buffing them. Plus they already have a blanket buff from Raga Draga. And then it says, whenever you cast a spell, if at least 7 mana was spent to cast it, untap target creature, gets 7/7. So you can buff something and give it trample. That card seems like a shoo-in for this deck. This deck I've seen people play. I've never seen it really post much results. But this is like an additional synergy for this kind of deck. But I could also see it being played in like Savala, where you're just like tap 3 dorks, and then they untap, and then, you know, you can use them again for more mana. Savala loves more mana, so, like, this seems like a shoe-in for a number of decks. I don't know exactly. I don't have a deck that I'm going to use it in, but I feel like there's decks that love this.
To me, the first deck that comes to mind where I think this is probably going to be tried, I think it'll be good enough, I really do. It's Marwyn the Nurturer, so she's the 1 green and 2, 1/1. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on her, and you tap her to add green mana equal to Marwyn's power. So initially, you play this, she gets a 1/1 counter, you tap her, she gets a 1/1 counter, you produce a shitload of green, then you untap her, and she then produces even more green mana, plus in a deck full of elves that are tapping or doing whatever.
Yeah, it feels very at home in any elf ball deck that you could be possibly building. I like it in Raga Draga as well. Even as commander itself, I don't think it's terrible. I don't know if it beats out Marwyn or Savala or even Yeva, because those are like kind of the top 3 competitive elf ball decks that are mono green. I don't know if it's better than those, but it still does something on a different axis.
I do like that it buffs the little 1/1 counter. While it could seem, irrelevant,
incidental,
is making your 1/1 elves into 2/2s is huge in a format where Orcish Bowmaster is still kind of the boogeyman for the mana dork decks. So.
We've literally changed our mana dorks. Like, I've cut Llanowar, Finhorn, and Elvish Mystic for most decks. I'm more on, like, Delighted Halfling. And Birds, we still play because you can't not. It's too good. But it's better than the elves. So, like, that's why you play it. Bigger butts are in favor right now because of that, but making them bigger just makes them harder to remove, and that's not bad. I have one more card I was super excited for when I saw it spoiled. I thought this was going to be really good in Pauper. We also discussed some ways that this could be good in CDH decks too, in like the 99. It's General Crete, I don't know. It's Kreat. You tell me how to pronounce that. I say Crete. General Crete the Boltbringer. It's a 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary goblin soldier. And it's a trigger to make a body on attack, but then also has impact tremors stapled onto it. So it says, whenever 1 or more goblins you control attack, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. So you attack with this. It's a 2/2. You attack
goblin.
with this, you make
Doesn't have to be this.
It can be any goblin. So this guy can just sit back. You swing with any goblin, you make another goblin. When that goblin enters, this triggers and says, do 1 damage to each opponent. Impact tremors on a creature that is focused on being tribal and is in a tribe that is so easy to just shit out a fuck ton of creatures. This could do a lot of damage. So my first thought was like, alright, this doesn't feel like it's really competitive, because like the most competitive, I think, goblin tribal commander, if you're going to try to take it to CDH level, is still Kranko, OG Kranko, that just taps, makes fuck ton of 1/1s for every 1/1 you have. Muxus also we've actually played against that on the channel and got our ass whooped, so it has potential as well. But this didn't feel like it was going to really compete with those. But in Pauper, damn, this is blowing the gates off. I thought. I played it a bunch. I found out it didn't really do what I thought it was going to do. It's not as good as I thought it was going to be. But then Kirk came at me with some suggestions as to where you might play it in CDH. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I think decks that sometimes we've seen the Agate Instigator still sees play now. Perforos God of Storm sees some play, and basically 2 decks that came to mind. There's the Rakdos Lord of Riots, I think is what it's called. It's the 6/6 when it deals combat damage to an opponent. Your creatures all cost X less to play, equal the number of life your opponents have lost, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Those kind of decks a lot of times will win with like an Ancestral Statue loop where they're casting Ancestral Statue over and over again and killing everybody with like the Perforos or the Agate Instigator, or there's the 1/3 that whenever an artifact TTBs it does damage. Anywho, those exist. Also, Animar sometimes wins with those loops now. That's kind of been the new.
Well, Ancestral Statue has been Animar for ages.
Yeah, but they usually used it to make an infinitely large Animar than just have to cast Walking Ballista, right?
If you can do anything that's infinitely either creating creatures or flickering creatures, whatever, to make infinite ETBs, this kills the table. Same as Impact Tremors, Witty Roastmaster, etc., etc., etc. Molten Gatekeeper. Like, there's been a ton of them that have been printed. And also, if you're building this deck, you probably include all of those. Same as I would in any Goblin deck, because
the nice thing about this one too, it's kind of twofold in that it's a lot of those decks are heavy creature decks. They want more creatures in play because they're either doing damage and gaining value, or like, with
well, even Goblin Tribal has like shit like Outnumber and Goblin War Strike, where it's like 1 red mana, deal damage to X target equal to the number of goblins you control, or just number of creatures you control, blah blah blah. So like there are synergies that are built into that as well.
And also when a goblin attacks, so if this attacks, if it can get in somewhere and you make a token goblin that survives, great. You can always just continuously attack with a token every turn, and create a new token. And if the original token dies, so be it. You're still getting the damage in. But also, it also gives you token bodies for your Beseech the Mirrors or your Edicts or your Culling Ritual.
If you're Rakdos, you also have like just Deadly Disputes and Corrupted Convictions and things where you just sack that extra body to draw some cards. So
it's also a 2/2, so it's easier to Imperial Recruiter to tutor for it if you need this kind of effect. You can't Imperial Recruiter for Impact Tremors, but you could
Goblin Matron and Goblin Recruiter.
Goblin Recruiter, any of that stuff. Huge thing also that's kind of a small little niche thing with this, but in a post ban meta that we're in now with a Jeweled Lotus band and Mana Crypt band, but more legendary creatures in your deck makes your Mox Amber live more often. This being a legend is
also
huge.
Your SWATs
Relic of Legends
in
too.
Red, but also if you're a dual color, you may have other free options.
I think this has a lot of upside. I mean, you've seen decks play Witty Roastmaster, Molten Gatekeeper, some other stuff that they've tried for this effect. This one, I think, being a legend, being able to produce its own bodies when it can attack or any goblins attack, has some upside. So I do think this will see some
something
play.
you can. I don't know if you're running this in like Sisay Weatherite, whatever the white one, 5 colors Sisay. Yeah, like this could still count towards your
legendary colored counts,
right? So, but also just create bodies instantly and whatever. So
yeah, I mean decks like also we even talked about Ob Nixilis. I think it's another one when. 1 damage matters because you're getting card advantage, and this can produce damage and repeatedly do so. So, I think people will try it. Whether it's better than the other options that currently exist, who knows? But being a creature and a legendary one at that it has some relevance that I think people will explore.
What's next?
Next, we put on the list just another card that, you are a product of your surroundings a lot of times, and this one is definitely an instance of that.
It's Joey. Meta.
Yeah, Joey that we play against on the channel occasionally, and probably more often than Islane would like, busts out his Surkara list. Yep. And this card is Bolt Wave. It's 1 red for a sorcery. Bolt Wave deals 3 damage to each opponent. So for a deck like that, this is another 1 mana, a pseudo draw 3 cards, which is great.
It's also just different version of a card that already exists, which we talked about, which was Flame Rift. 1 in a red, deal 4 to each player. You do get an additional impulsive draw off of it with Surkara, but this is still just 1 mana deal 3.
I'm pretty tempted to try this out. Florian, just as a 1 mana, look at the top 9.
I also don't see a problem with this if you're in a pinger heavy deck or an attrition deck, an aristocrats deck. This is just 1 mana, deal 3 to everybody.
There's that new Niv Mizzet Visionary. This is 1 mana, draw 3.
There's that, and then there's also other cards that exist where you just deal damage to a player, draw a card, deal damage to a player, do X, do Y, do Z. 1 mana lightning bolt to everybody is pretty fucking good. The only thing that sucks about it is it's not lightning bolt where you can do 3 damage to any target, but you're probably running both.
A couple of decks I think we'll definitely try it. I think I'm going to try it in Florian. Just again, 1 red to do 9 damage total to my opponents to have Florian flip 9 cards. Pretty okay to look at, so I'm going to try it.
This next one is kind of along the same lines as what we were just talking about. It's a Fire Spitter Whelp. It's a 2 in a red for a 2/2 dragon with flying. It says whenever you cast a non-creature or dragon spell, this creature does 1 damage to each opponent. It's another symmetrical pinger. We've already talked about a couple lists where you might want pingers. This is good in Omnix. It's good in other places. Niv Mizzet type decks like this. If you're in a Dragon's Approach deck, this is the kind of thing you could tutor up just to do extra damage. If you're trying to burn the table out, do attrition things, this is great. If you get other triggers off of doing like a single damage, like Omnix, or just doing damage in general, this is gonna help facilitate that. And it's 2 flyer for 3 mana, so like you can still hit people in the face.
I saw some people attempting for a while that I think they might try this in. Is that, I'll butcher the saying of these, I always do. It's that O'Hare Axonal Deepest Might, the little red flip land creature that whenever a red source deals damage, it deals damage to his power instead. It's just another effect of that.
Yeah. Anything that's doing that, or even those damage doublers we talked about earlier, where there's decks that have a number of those. If you're able to do more damage with this, that's even better. It's not great, and it's not necessarily like something that you see play in a lot of decks, but this sort of template has been popular in decks, and this is just more redundancy for that, and that's why we wanted to highlight it. All right, we got a couple more, and these last couple Kirk added to the list, so I'm going to let him read them off, and we'll discuss.
The next one, it's Abyssal Harvester. 2 black and 1 for a 3/2 Demon Warlock. Has the ability of tap it, exile target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. Then exile all other nightmare tokens you control. So, 3 mana, 3/2, not the worst rate for that, but you're using it for its ability to synergize with an entomb type effect, a lively dirge, entomb. There's creatures that come into play and tutor a creature to your graveyard. There's a number of cards that can just put a card from your library directly into your graveyard. This one lets you then create a copy of it for free immediately. You can also hit your opponents if you have good removal. They've got something good and juicy that you kill it, it hits the grave, boom, you exile it, you get the token copy of it. They are accidentally milling, they're discarding, whatever. It's got incidental ways of getting value there. It's
little grave hate is not bad.
Never a bad thing, and creatures are definitely one of those things you would, especially if it's something like a Razaketh or
just
a
any deck that
something.
might be running some recursion, being able to interact with that is good.
Card. Yeah, they discard it. Probably don't want to do the what's the old animate dead World Gorger Dragon. You probably don't want to create a World Gorger Dragon token, but hey, maybe you do. No. I don't know. Probably not though. But just this ability being in the color that is best suited to tutor a card to your graveyard, being black. This is something to consider. Will it see a lot of play? Probably not, but who knows? They're always printing new and interesting cards, and they're always liking to put things directly in the grave from black. So who knows? There's enough of them we get out there. This might see some more play.
Yeah, like anything that you can add to your deck that's going to give you more options to try and win is good. I also notably said that you might. If you're running a Chainer deck, this might be something you like, because Chainer gives nightmares +1/+1, but it also has a downside of like dying and killing all of your nightmares. So maybe that's not good, but like also maybe it's good. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean this one's just interesting enough for the effect that it has that it might see some play. I mean, I'm envisioning a world where you're entombing Razaketh to the grave, and you have a creature on board already that you can sack, activate it to exile. You don't have to cast an Animate Dead or a Necromancy or something that could get countered. This is on a creature that could be on the battlefield before you go for this loop. So again, who knows? They'll probably just counter the Entomb at that point, but whatever.
I don't hate it.
A possibility.
It's got some uses. It's also, like a demon, which Kalia maybe it might.
I mean, there's a world where you infinitely mill yourself somehow, and then you reanimate your Thassa's Oracle pseudo. So there you go.
There you go.
No one's ever won like that before, right? Shit.
Well, we had spoilers, but it was like a year ago. But we had a game where somebody milled their whole ass library with their Tainted Pact and then just won because they managed to go through their entire library just to find the Thassas, and it was like the second to last card. It was like, are you serious? That was Rev, by the way. Anyhow, last card. Let's wrap it up.
This one is Bloodthirsty Conqueror. 2 black and 3 for a 5/5 flying Death Touch Vampire Knight. It also has whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So notably, I believe it's Sanguine Bond is the enchantment.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. Normally it's Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond together win a game. This is one half of that, the same as Dina and Vito. Dina, Vito, and Witherbloom Apprentice. They all enable one half of this. This is another card that can enable another half of that with the Sanguine Bond, Exquisite Blood kind of bullshit.
I don't think it's not Witherbloom Apprentice. It's some
but all of them combo. No, you're right. Witherbloom doesn't. It's Dina and Vito. They combo with this. But then you also have Marauding Bright Priest and a number of other cards that do the same effect. So you can essentially, if you're in Golgari and you're on one of those commanders, this is another relevant piece that can help you get there. But it's also just any black deck. This is a 5/5 flyer with Death Touch. You're not getting blocked. Or you're blocking everything that's coming at you and killing it with ease. And then it just has this other little clause that, hey, that guy lost some life, you gain some life. If this guy just hits your opponent for 5 damage, they lost the life, so you gain the life. Can keep you healthy. Yeah. And if you're playing like Adnaz or whatever, this can be something that, even though it costs the same as Adnaz, and you probably play Adnaz before you play this, if it happens to be one of those games where you had a little bit slower of a start and you just happen to play this out and then you happen to get a tutor and you happen to tutor for Adnaz, well.
Yeah, a lot of those creatures, the other ones like Vito and such, I think their clause is whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life, which combos directly with this. But the problem with those cards is then you have to play something to gain life. And there are notably not a lot of great life gain cards.
That was why Dina was good, because she had the clause to like do something to do it, if I recall correctly. I might be misremembering.
I know she's a creature stack outlet. I don't remember what else she does. It's been a minute since I've seen it.
Yeah. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life.
So all of that effect is
loses a life, you gain that much life. So that is a loop with her.
Yep.
Just the same as Exquisite Blood. So this is another redundancy, and Exquisite Blood I think costs about the same. So it's another redundancy.
Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond both cost the exact same, 2 black and 3. The nice thing with this one being a creature, it's a lot easier to tutor for it if you're in like a Golgari, like you said, reanimated, etc. And plus, just whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life is a lot better clause than the reverse, because people are going to lose incidental life for whatever reason, whether it's their one rings or their mana bases.
That's what made Dina and Vito worse, because you needed the other piece to make it actually good. This is the opposite piece where it just does what you want it to do by itself. But if you have those other pieces, now you have a loop.
Yeah.
So it is redundancy for that. I think if you're still playing Dina, this is a shoo-in. If you're not playing Dina, you may need to build around it. I think it still works with Vito too. So it should be a redundant piece for some known quantities. And if not, it's just a fucking big ass beater that happens to gain you some life when it hits.
Right. And I say decks that are searching for their new post-ban identity win cons, new old win cons. We're seeing some of the stuff that 3 years ago, 4 years ago had been tried or had been played more often, etc. So the more redundant pieces we get for those old combos that maybe bring them a step better is good. Yeah. I've certainly lost to a combo of that. I know a Sanguine Bond Exquisite Blood combo that I've lost to. It's been a while, but I've lost to it. I know it exists. This is just a better piece for that.
I've lost to it and I've won with it.
I think it will see play for the combo potential. And like you said, it's just a huge value piece if you play it in a mid-rangey meta, especially if there's any kind of stacks decks that come back that can play black. Maybe this is something they look at just because
it could also just be just a beefy Tymna attacker. If you really want to have some top end and you're not playing blue farm, this is your top end instead of Crom. You got a 5/5. But that pretty much rounds things up. That was the cards that we want to talk about. There are a lot of other cards in the set, obviously, and this is supposed to be a legal set for the next 5 years and is supposed to be basically unlimited print demand. So cards here should be readily available and also not prohibitively priced. Like right now, yes, preseason or pre-order pricing is always stupid. Those Heir Apparents are $5 a piece, and that's a fucking
that's ludicrous.
But over the next 5 years, you're going to be able to open enough packs to get as many as you want, and it should come down in price, and it shouldn't be an issue. So,
yeah, but I think the special artist print ones, I'm sure will be expensive as hell, but the rest of them will be.
Those will, yeah, but unfortunately, some of them are like the Starfish and the Goblin and blah blah blah. Like some of those are actually unique mechanically cards that's the only printing, and they're probably going to be more rare than some of the other more common cards, but it is what it is. We're used to that. Fuck them, print them, proxy your shit, order from NPC.
Playtest cards.
We don't care. We don't care about that.
So. Yep, absolutely. So what are your thoughts overall for this set as far as power goes? Do you think it's kind of low, kind of high, kind of mid?
Honestly, I was pretty impressed because they talked about it before they started spoiling, and I was just like, it's another core set. Who gives a shit? When I was in Vegas and they started previewing cards, people I was hanging out with were like showing me shit on their phones, like, bro, did you see this card? And I was like, holy shit, that's pretty good. Notably, I was hanging out with Pauper people, and most of the cards that we discussed were Pauper cards, and to make this video, I had to look through all the rest of the set. It doesn't feel overpowered, but it does feel like it's adding a substantial amount of, like, general, like, good stuff to what would be standard and whatever. We don't play standard, so I don't really care about standard, but, like, that's what the focus of it was. And despite that, I like it better in Blue Burrow. Like, I feel like there's more cards here than there was in Blue Burrow.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that this one's. I mean, I think as far as CDH cards, staples go, so to speak, it's a little underpowered for that. But again, I think it's got enough
range across.
Yeah, it's got enough for the fringe decks to kind of bolster those. I'm always a fan of a set that has cards that can bring pseudo-irrelevant commanders or forgotten commanders or are slightly underpowered or behind, etc. Whatever you want to say.
We highlighted a bunch of cards that were redundant. There were redundancies for decks that already exist or additional cards that could push a deck that isn't really there yet over the top. Yeah, I think overall it's a pretty even. It's an even kill. Like there's nothing that's super busted. Like everything else we talked about on even the honorable mentions and on the main list, I think a lot of those cards are going to see some sort of play, but they're niche in the sense of like this card really fits into this archetype, this card fits into this archetype, those sort of things, where it's not like this is a staple. As far as staples go, I don't think there really was a staple. Overall, I think it's pretty mid, but I still feel like there were more cards in it that I was more excited for than the Blue Burrow, which was a standard set, like a premier set, whatever you want to call it. So
I'll be excited to see what we missed. How about that? Because I'm sure there's something that we just totally just went right over, and it's going to be a breakout. You brought
cards that I glossed over too, especially that Starfish butthole thing. But with that, we have covered what we wanted to talk about. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Thank you for watching. if you made it this far, please subscribe. Please hit the like button, hit the bell, all that shit. I have a Patreon. You know, if you want to be a little generous and throw us a buck or two, we love it. Otherwise, everybody have a good night, and we will see you guys next time.
Till then.